3 Roman legions. That's nearly 20,000 of the most disciplined soldiers on the planet. An unstoppable force marching through a dark, unfamiliar forest. And in 3 days, they were gone, wiped from the face of the earth. This wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't some random storm or a freak disaster. It was a strategy, a perfectly executed plan designed for one single purpose: annihilation. Introduction. Throughout history, the fate of empires wasn't always decided by the army with the most soldiers or the sharpest swords. More often than not, victory belonged to the commander with the most cunning plan. From the dawn of civilization to the modern age, a handful of lethal battlefield tactics have been used over and over again. They turn the tide, they shatter armies, and they rewrite history. These aren't just simple maneuvers. They are masterpieces of strategy, engineered to exploit an enemy's deepest fears and weaknesses. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 10 of the deadliest, from the suffocating grip of an encirclement to the pure shock of a perfectly timed charge. These are the strategies that secured impossible victories and left a legacy of blood and brilliance on the battlefield. The ambush, the oldest and maybe the most primal tactic of all, is the ambush. It plays on 2 of humanity's most powerful weapons on the battlefield: surprise and pure terror. By hiding your forces and luring an enemy into a pre-selected kill zone, even a smaller, weaker army can get devastating results against a much bigger foe. There's no greater example than the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest in 9C. A Germanic chieftain named Arminius, educated by the Romans, used his inside knowledge to trick the Roman governor, Varus. He led 3 entire legions, almost 20,000 men, deep into a dense forest where a hidden alliance of Germanic tribes waited. Stretched out for miles on narrow, muddy tracks, the Roman column was completely helpless. The ambush turned into a 3-day slaughter that wiped out 1/10 of the Roman Empire's entire military and stopped its expansion into Germania for good. From primal chaos, we move to unforgiving order. Picture a wall of men, packed shoulder to shoulder, their shields overlapping to create an unbroken barrier. From this wall, a forest of long, deadly spears juts out. This was the Greek phalanx, a formation that absolutely dominated the battlefields of antiquity. Its strength was its unity. Each soldier was protected by his neighbor's shield, forming a single armored beast, almost impossible to break from the front. The goal was simple: march forward like an unstoppable steamroller and grind the enemy down. But this incredible strength was also its greatest weakness. The phalanx was stiff and clumsy. It needed flat, open ground to work and was incredibly vulnerable on its sides and rear. If an enemy could get around it, the formation would crumble. Roman maniple and testudo, the weakness of the phalanx, it was the exact opportunity the Romans were waiting for. They didn't just copy the Greeks, they made it better. Rome developed the maniple system, breaking that single rigid block of the phalanx into smaller, much more flexible units. This let the Roman legion move with incredible speed and adaptability, flowing around enemies and exploiting gaps that would have shattered a traditional phalanx. But the Romans also came up with a legendary defensive move, the testudo, or tortoise formation. When advancing under a storm of arrows, legionaries would lock their shields together in front, on the sides, and even over their heads, creating a shell of armor almost impossible to penetrate. This moving fortress allowed Roman soldiers to get right up to fortified walls or cross open ground with very few casualties. It was a testament to Roman discipline and a terrifying psychological weapon. B. Wedge formation. While some tactics are about defense, others are built for one singular, devastating purpose: to break the enemy. The wedge formation is the perfect example of a breakthrough strategy. It was often used by cavalry, but elite infantry used it too. The formation is shaped just like a spearhead, designed to focus the most amount of force on the smallest possible point in an enemy's line. The goal? Punch a hole straight through their center, causing chaos and panic. This tactic was famously used by Alexander the Great, who would personally lead his elite companion cavalry in a wedge to shatter the Persian lines. By driving this spearhead deep into the enemy's heart, a commander could disrupt their command, break their morale, and trigger a total collapse of their entire army. Siege warfare. Not all battles were fought on open fields. Thousands of years, the ultimate sign of power was a fortified city, and taking one required a completely different and uniquely brutal set of strategies. Siege warfare was a multi-pronged attack on both walls and mines. Attackers used massive engines like battering rams and catapults to pound fortifications into dust. They would dig tunnels, a technique called sapping, to literally collapse walls from underneath. But just as important was the psychological game. Armies would impale prisoners right outside the city walls or use other terror tactics to convince the defenders to surrender. A siege was a relentless test of endurance, engineering, and morale. Alexander the Great's famous Siege of Tyre, where he built a land bridge across the sea to reach the island city, just shows the incredible lengths commanders would go to. Naval ramming and boarding out on the seas of the ancient Mediterranean, warfare was just as brutal. Warships like the Greek trireme weren't just for transport, they were weapons. The main tactic was ramming. Each ship had a massive, bronze-covered ram at its prow, built to splinter the hull of an enemy ship and send it to the bottom. The Battle of Salamis in 480 BCE is a masterclass in this. A smaller, outnumbered Greek fleet tricked the massive Persian navy into a narrow strait, where their huge numbers became a disadvantage. The more nimble Greek ships ran circles around the clumsy Persian vessels, ramming and sinking them. But once a ship was crippled, the fight wasn't over. It would turn into a desperate boarding action, where soldiers swarmed onto the enemy deck for vicious hand-to-hand combat, basically turning a naval battle into a floating land war. The double-end development few tactics are as legendary or as deadly as the double envelopment, sometimes called the pincer movement. It's the stuff of military genius. A high-risk, high-reward move that, when it works, ends in the complete annihilation of an enemy army. The strategy involves deliberately making your center look weak to bait the enemy into pushing forward. As the enemy walks into the trap, powerful forces hidden on the flanks swing in, attacking from both sides and eventually closing the circle behind them. The most famous example in all of history is Hannibal's masterpiece at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE. Even though he was heavily outnumbered, his Carthaginian army of 40,000, 50,000 faced a Roman force of 70,000, 86,000. Hannibal surrounded and systematically wiped out the much larger Roman force. The Romans were packed so tightly inside the circle that many couldn't even lift their arms to fight. The tactic is still studied today as the perfect example of tactical genius. The horns of the buffalo halfway across the world, and centuries later, another legendary commander, Shaka Zulu, developed his own devastating way of surrounding an enemy. In the 19th century, he created the horns of the buffalo, a formation designed for pure speed and overwhelming force. The Zulu army, or Impi, was split into three parts. The chest, made of the best warriors, would hit the enemy head-on, holding them in place. At the same time, the horns, made up of younger, faster warriors, would race out to the left and right, circling the enemy. A fourth group, the loins, made of veteran warriors, was held in reserve. This tactic allowed for incredibly fast, coordinated attacks that completely surrounded and destroyed their opponents. Annihilation. One man completely changed the face of European warfare: Napoleon Bonaparte. His strategy wasn't just about winning battles, it was about the total and complete destruction of the enemy's army. Napoleon loved using overwhelming force and massed assaults. He would often concentrate his artillery to blast holes in the enemy line before sending in huge infantry columns to pour through the gap. He was willing to accept staggering casualties on both sides if it meant one single decisive battle that would shatter his opponent's will to keep fighting. This strategy of annihilation, seen in battles like Austerlitz, was a big change from the more limited warfare of the past. For Napoleon, war wasn't some gentleman's game of maneuver. It was a brutal contest of destruction, where the only real victory was wiping the other army off the map. Chemical and incendiary warfare. Our final tactic marks a dark turn in the history of war, where the battlefield became impersonal and the goal shifted to inflicting mass terror. In the 20th century, chemical and incendiary weapons introduced a whole new level of horror. During World War I, poison gas like chlorine and mustard gas was released, causing agonizing death and disabling thousands. Approximately 1.3 million casualties were attributed to chemical weapons in WWI, with around 90,000, 100,000 deaths. Later, in World War II and Vietnam, incendiary weapons like napalm were used to burn huge areas, inflicting horrific injuries and psychological trauma. These weapons weren't designed for tactical precision, they were designed for widespread, indiscriminate destruction. Their development changed the ethics of war forever, leading to international treaties banning their use. They serve as a chilling reminder of humanity's capacity to weaponize science for the deadliest of ends. If you found this look into the deadly art of war fascinating, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into history. And let us know in the comments below, which of these tactics do you think was the most effective? Or is there another deadly strategy from history that you think should have made our list? We want to hear from you. Thanks for watching.